Okay, good morning, everyone. We are happy today to welcome you to today's Health Sciences Talk Series, where we will delve into the dynamic intersection of interdisciplinary research and strategic management within the context of the AUB Nature Conservation Center. Our speaker, Mr. Antoine Kallab, serves as the Associate Director and Instructor of Practice at the Nature Conservation Center, where he spearheads the design and execution of the center's visionary 2030 strategic roadmap. With a wealth of experience spanning urban economic development, public policy, and disaster management, Antoine brings a unique perspective to our discussion today. His role extends beyond conventional boundaries, as he not only oversees the center's strategic direction, but also fosters collaborations, manages research initiatives, and cultivates partnerships with stakeholders locally and globally. So in the face of recent challenges, including the aftermath of the 2020 Beirut port blast, the NCC encountered setbacks that required a bold reimagining of its future trajectory. And against this backdrop, the NCC team embarked on a journey to craft a transformative vision for the center, one that harnesses its interdisciplinary prowess to address pressing environmental concerns such as nature conservation and climate change. And in today's seminar, we will explore the intricacies of this roadmap by examining the convergence of strategic management principles with the imperative for interdisciplinary research. So without further ado, Mr. Kallab, the floor is all yours. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I think you can hear me now. Okay. Thank you, Dr. Hanoun and FHS and Dr. Mayada Kanj as well for inviting me today. So, and thank you all for attending online or in person. So, I'm going to start with a bit of personal background. So, as you can see, I'm originally an architect. I don't have any training in business management, in finance, in HR, or in environmental sciences, and so on. So as you can see, when I first got the call from Dr. Alandau to join NCC, I wasn't really sure if this was a good fit for me. And of course, early on, we talked about the need to, in a way, revamp NCC and, design a new strategic vision for the center. Again, I wasn't sure how I was the right person to do it, but we work in universities, we come from research backgrounds, so what better way than to adopt a scientific approach, a systematic approach to any research question that you may have. So that's how Dr. Dao, Alain, and myself really went about designing the strategic vision, initiating this change. So a bit of background about NCC. It was founded in 2003 by Dr. Salma Talhou. It's a faculty-led interdisciplinary research center, which means that this is not a center with, for example, a full-time dedicated director. This is not a center with in-house faculty and expertise. This is more or less a platform that seeks to engage different faculty across campus, bring them together, and put them around one table and tell them how can you together work on research and projects that have to do with environmental studies, with climate change, with nature conservation, biodiversity preservation, and so on. So this in itself makes it, I'm going to use the term business model, but because this is not a particular discipline, so we borrow the terms from what we know and what we see around us. So in a way, this is the business or the operational model of NCC, which presents its own advantages and its own challenges. So we had to work around this, I would say, constraint in a way. It's also worth mentioning that so far there's been 3 directors. The first one, Dr. Salma Talhou, who stayed on for about 11 years. Dr. Talhou comes from landscape design and ecosystems management background. Then Dr. Najat Saliba took over. Dr. Najat Saliba comes from a chemistry background. And then Dr. Alain took over in 2019. Perfect timing for Alain. So Dr. Dow comes from business management and social entrepreneurship. So why am I mentioning this? Because the center being organic and being faculty-led, and the role of director is seen as a service, so he or she is not fully dedicated to the center, which means that the center also is quite organic. It's like it takes on, in a way, the character of the different person who is leading it at a particular time. So this also is an advantage, but also stands in the way in having, a clear timeline and continuity since the day of its inception and so on. The center has three primary values: so environmental stewardship, community development, and biodiversity preservation. So some of the projects that have been done over the past 20 years include the Environment Academy, with a team that goes, engages communities on the ground, co-designs solutions with them, using scientific and evidence-based approach. You can see that there's also work on innovation and trying to work with startups or the private sector on sustainable solutions and business models. Environmental stewardship, so it reflects with the yearly IBDAC competition. This year we're hosting the 17th edition, and on April 24th, if I'm not mistaken, 25th. And other projects that we've had, for example, on a regional level, such as on our work on waste management in cities around the Mediterranean, our work on gathering and making environmental data accessible in Lebanon. And finally, there's the work under biodiversity conservation. Some of the examples are medicinal plants, which are led by Dr. Nadim Darwish, who's with us today. Our work very much on trying to see how we can reinforce the connection with nature through a better approach to preservation. So the way NCC functions, it's the same status as other centers like Asfari or Sam Ferris Institute. So it has a director that is appointed by an executive committee, who are all faculty. The director their role is seen as service to the university, so they maintain their affiliation to their original faculty, and they report directly to the provost. And we have an advisory board who is here to support whenever we need advice, contacts, and so on. So, given NCC's model, it has its own set of constraints. So as I mentioned before, it depends on faculty. We need PIs and co-PIs to conduct research. And given that NCC doesn't really house faculty itself, so we need to constantly reach out to the different faculty members on campus and get them to work with us, which again is an advantage, but also has its own set of challenges. Talent retention in academic settings. So as you know, especially for research assistants, they come in and they spend 1 or 2 years, but eventually they move on, which means that they are taking the set of knowledge that they gain. And given the way academia works, there's no linear progression for many of the people who come in and work for research, which again has its advantages and its own set of constraints. The lack of institutionalization and institutional memory. So this was something, because NCC is more or less an organic platform and very much depends on individual initiatives, this stood in the way of having a systematic way of operating the center, of maintaining internal archive, data management, and so on. And finally, no systematic tracking of impact and operation. So there's no systematic way of comparing what we are doing now in terms of impact to what was being done 20 years ago. So, and this has to do with finance. For example, how do I know which type of project can have the maximum impact on both social, environmental, economic perspectives with the least amount of resources? So it's not about business and profit, but given that resources are tight in research, we need to make sure that we have the maximum impact with the smallest amount of resources. So it's about efficiency. Now, when the crisis happened, it added additional layers of challenges. So, the human resource drain, the center lost 5 of its 8 permanent members. So we went from 8 to 3. 80% reduction in funding, whether it's through grants or operational budget. Loss of talent and know-how. So again, we go back to the issue of losing this institutional memory that is vital for the growth of a center. And an inability to engage faculty, develop proposals, and conduct field research, primarily because of COVID. So because of the lockdowns, this was a significant restraint. And contrary to a faculty, research centers are primarily about research. So, there's no, in a way, guaranteed demand every year for students who are going to sign up to follow particular courses. The center has to sustain its own activities. So this is when Dr. Alando made a decision, of course, in consultation with the executive committee, with the provost, and with the advisory board and the team, for the need to establish a new strategic vision. We needed to clarify where the center is going. And once we have a direction, we know the best way to get there. So this was more or less a theory of change. So, of course, he started with a consultation meeting with faculty to get feedback on how different faculty at AUB see the role of NCC and where they can see it and how they see their potential and where it can go. He remobilized the advisory board. So he really reached out to each and every one of them, made sure that they were ready to support, give us feedback whenever we send them documents. He started meetings with AUB's leadership. So whether it's the advancement office, the president, the provost office, and different heads of departments. And he hired an associate director, myself. And I'm only mentioning this because, the decision to have someone in a permanent management position within the center, but that can also be the lead architect behind the strategic vision, was the way to effectively start this, this long process. So we set about asking ourselves five questions to very much see what we want to, derive from this exercise. The first one is, how can we improve talent retention? So, putting the researchers and the staff at the center of the vision was something that we were very attached to. And so the idea of talent retention and talent development within the center was the first question we asked ourselves. How can we institutionalize 20 years of knowledge and enable research continuity? We did not want to start from scratch. We knew that 20 years is not something to be taken for granted. There's a lot that was done, and we wanted to capitalize on the different edge and pioneering research that NCC had done. Third, how do we incentivize AUB faculty? This is a constant question. How do we get different AUB faculty who are already overloaded, who have perhaps other platforms to conduct their research? What can NCC offer them that perhaps other centers or other faculty doesn't offer them? So this was also something we needed to reflect on. Fourth, how do we improve the center's ability to self-sustain its operations? Between a decreasing operational budget, between decreasing research grant opportunities and the difficulty of attracting these grants, how can we make sure that we are not so fragile on a financial and resource level? And finally, how do we position AUB-NCC as a key actor in environmental and climate research, not on the national, but on the regional level? And the idea of the regional level is not just about having bigger outreach. It's very much because environmental issues are geography-based. So we would not want to limit ourselves to political borders. We had to work on a regional level. We wanted to have this exchange of knowledge, learn from other communities, and try to see how we can work together on regional challenges. So my brother is a consultant, is a management consultant in one of these big firms. And I would say 90% of their work is very much, not going to say the word, but I think you all know what I'm thinking. But from time to time, they actually say smart things. And one of the things that I took from him is that, if you wanted to initiate change management and to sustain it, you have to make sure that your people are on board. And you have to start with your people. Because if they don't very much embrace the vision that you may have, which may be 100% efficient and correct, if your people don't embrace it, then there's very much, you're either going to have a very difficult way of implementing it, or it's just not going to happen at all. So this was a very important starting point for us. And based on that, we put in guiding principles for the way that we were going to work. So as I mentioned before, we wanted to have a collaborative process, not only internally within NCC, we wanted also to open up the doors of this process and see faculty members, other centers, perhaps external partners, what we could learn from them. I mean, we knew that NCC's problems in particular were not the first center in the world to face this kind of problems. We're sure that the solutions existed out there through research or through expert consultations. We wanted to find these solutions. Of course, we wanted an evidence-based approach. We preach about evidence-based and informed decision-making. We had to integrate it in the way we worked and made our own decisions. We wanted to build on existing knowledge while opening new horizons. So, of course, climate, environmental priorities, many of them changed, or even their framing changed, or we know more about these challenges. So it was important to open up new horizons, align with the new needs of the region. But we also needed to build on what was done in the past 20 years, and there was a lot to build on. Finally, we had to be resource efficient. So, throughout this process, we had very, very, very limited budget, which is NCC's budget. So how do we, maintain our day-to-day operations with a budget that is, that is dedicated only for the day-to-day, but at the same time initiate such a big process. So we had to be very careful about every cent that went out of the center. And finally, we wanted to make it a participatory and inclusive process. And as I'm going to mention later on, this inclusion very much included from the top of AUB's leadership, all the way down to our interns. So every person had his or her own perspective to contribute to how we were changing things. So this was, in a way, the process that we, to gather information, this was the process that we followed. So we had consultation with leadership, advisory board, executive board, the AUB faculty, and staff, and the constituency or the community of AUB-NCC, past staff, current staff, past interns, and so on, the advisory board, executive committee. We were doing research, so on benchmarking with other strategic visions. What is a strategic vision? What is this document supposed to contain? So, for example, we were very much inspired by the strategic vision of the University College London, and a lot of the template that they used, we ended up finding that it actually suited our needs. And we also did a lot of research on the needs when it comes to environmental and climate change in the region, which priorities we needed to tackle. And of course, we had to align. We could not work independently. We're part of a big community and a large institution. We aligned with the vital 2030 vision of AUB, with NCC's pillars, and with a 20 years impact report that I'm going to talk about in a bit. So this is the 20 years of impact report. One of the first exercises we started as part of the process, and this is what my colleague Anna Hurani led on, is very much to measure everything that was done in the past 20 years. And this was a hectic process. You can ask Anna, because again, there was no systematic archive. There was no systematic way of having the same indicators, archiving the projects in the same way. But we were quite surprised at what was done in the past 20 years. And as you can see, the impact is for a center that is not endowed, that doesn't have a stable source or a budget. We were quite, there was obviously a lot to work on, whether it's publications, it's engagement, academic impact, or community impact. So this was a strong foundation to further on project where we wanted the center to be. After this consultative process, the introspective process, the benchmarking, the research, connecting with different people. Okay. So. Okay. So these were the key findings. We had a competitive edge in several areas of research, and one of the most important areas, which really we found that very few people tackle in the region, which is medicinal plants, for example. And this was, having a collaboration between biodiversity experts, environmental science experts, and medical doctors was something that was pretty unique to NCC. So, and this is just one example, but there were a lot of examples like this. We felt that in the past 20 years, there is a competitive edge in business terms that we could build on and very much argue for the need and the innovation potential of NCC. We needed to clarify the incentive for faculty to work with our center, which is a constant question, and we're still learning as we go. But this was at the heart of the challenges that we were facing. The center's key areas of impact and research priorities are not clear. So again, if they might be clear for the center itself, but there was a significant communication and dissemination issue that we needed to tackle as well. The difficulty in knowledge dissemination and reaching target audiences. So of course, this complements the third point. The need for internal capacity building on a wide array of skills. So usually the way it functions is that you would have different faculties from different centers who would bring in their own project. But this means that the type of the profile of the researchers change, the level of seniority changed, the particular methods and processes were very much diverse. And of course, this brings strength because diversity always enriches the center. But there were some issues that we needed to align on to make our work more efficient. We needed to use more IT tools, for example. We needed to align on very basic stuff like which referencing style we use for our papers, for example, when we are working on something internal. These what may seem as minor issues, they can make our work much more collaborative. They can encourage us to work together more and make our work much more efficient. New talent retention strategy is needed. So as I mentioned before, because of low wages, because sometimes we need a senior researcher, but we can only afford the junior researcher, then there is no option. We're not going to let go of the project. The idea is to jump in and find, of course, the right person, people who are willing to learn, and there are plenty out there, but be engaged in their personal growth as researchers and as employees. Finally, we needed, not finally, but we also needed to diversify the output. I mean, of course, we are primarily an academic research centers, but centers, unlike faculty, have a primary mission of taking research outside the walls of campus, contributing to policy, contributing to communities, contributing to a very wide array of audiences and groups. And with that, we could not just, knock on doors with scientific peer-reviewed articles. So we needed to diversify our output, even if we didn't want to diversify the research that we did. We were not maximizing the use of AUB resources and opportunities. We learned that AUB has a lot to offer to the centers. I mean, Salpi here is a great example of how the libraries are ready to support and build the capacity of the staff. The writing center, the different departments across campus, most of them are just happy at any chance to contribute. One of the things we did when we needed job descriptions, we went to this business school, to the HR masters, and told them, we know that you have a course where your students have to write job descriptions. We restructured the center and have these positions. They said, we'd love to write the job descriptions for you, and they would be corrected by an expert. So, it was very much thinking about, because we didn't have the budget to every time, hire a consultant or hire additional resources, there's a lot that you can find at AUB, and we wanted to leverage this even more. There was consensus on the need to restructure. No one argued that particular point, but we also needed a systematic impact, a way to measure our impact and have an internal monitoring and evaluation framework. So this was the document that we ended up releasing. It's a 7-year vision. It's accessible on the website. If you go in under strategic vision, you can find this document. And in this document, we decided that we would have 5 strategic principles to base our work on. The first one is achieving academic leadership and innovation through interdisciplinary research. So, this one is the most obvious. We are, at the end of the day, a scientific research center housed in a university. Producing academic and scientific research should be at the core of our work. Now, what do we do with this research? this was also a big question we needed to tackle. And this is why we added, for example, a principle looking into engaging communities and stakeholders through active participation. So we did not want to have participation that is, nominal or symbolic. We wanted the communities, we wanted to have input from the communities the same way we used our scientific resources to support any project we might be doing with them. We also wanted to build internal capacities and maximize impact. We knew that we have dedicated researchers, dedicated staff, but we wanted to align the way we work together and support them in self-growth and self-development. Because at the end of the day, NCC is a place where they are staying for maybe 1 to 3 or 4 years, and we have a responsibility towards our staff to also make sure that we are always supporting them to fulfill their potential and making sure that NCC plays a significant part in maintaining them or developing their career ambitions and self-trajectory. Optimizing climate action through accessible training, education, and knowledge sharing. So this was also an opportunity to engage much more with education, with the different faculties, and also expanding the target audiences for education, trying to work with different sectors, with the private sectors, public sectors, offering professional development courses that can support mainstreaming the idea of sustainability and environmental preservation. And finally, securing financial stability for operation sustainability and growth. So the idea is that whether we like it or not, we needed to have a strategy to ensure, from a fiscal and financial perspective, we're able to sustain ourselves on the long run, so that we're not always bound by donor conditions or particular grants, and we have the freedom to constantly innovate. So, this is just one screenshot from the document that I showed before. You can see that under each principle, you have key outcomes, you have priorities for the first 2 years, and then priorities for the 3 to 7 years that follow. You had strategic actions and internal development strategies. Now, this document doesn't really go into details, and it's not the purpose. A vision should remain high level. But at the end of the day, we needed to take this vision and turn it into actions that can be implemented on the ground. And so, obviously, priorities, actions, resources, all of these are constantly moving, they're constantly changing. So we needed live documents to very much specify the different actions we wanted to take. Michel Hall? Okay. The full screen. Okay. So we decided to split this vision into 3 implementation roadmaps, or strategic implementation roadmaps. So the roadmaps would be very much a checklist of specific actions that are, designed to contribute to the implementation of this large-scale vision, but with also different phases, because obviously it's a 7-year vision, so there's progress that has to be taken into account. There are different priorities, different circumstances that have to keep us able to be flexible, to and to always adjust. And you can see that we split it into 3 roadmaps, and each roadmap has its own thematic priority. The first one is kickstarting the institutionalization of the vision, and making sure that we stop the bleed of resources, of talent, and very much stabilize NCC before we can start building. The second one would be evaluating progress and start expanding the research and activities. And of course, the last one would be very much focusing on lessons learned and looking forward beyond 2030. So some of the actions that we took, you're going to be surprised by how, to which degree the scales change. A simple action could be changing the layout of the office. This goes into our implementation roadmap because the way we designed it is actually aligned with the vision. And other actions could be, for example, working on an environmental observatory project with the Ministry of Environment. So you'll see that all of these fit within one document because, again, the idea is to take this very high-level vision and work on mainstreaming it across the different activities that we have. One of the things we focus on, again, is the idea of enabling research continuity. How do we take everything that was done in the past 20 years and safeguard it, build on it, and develop areas of excellence within these particular areas? And this is why we are launching 5 research programs. The first one is Water and Life. And these research programs, they were selected on one hand by looking into the history of what NCC has done, but also on the other hand by the benchmarking process and the research we did, the consultation to very much determine areas of priority from an environmental and climate perspective. So the first one is Water and Life, this looking into everything water related. The second one is Health and Well-being, so very much the program that combines our work on, for example, mental health in the environment, on medicinal plants, new collaborations with FHS, for example, on climate and public health and so on. So these would be hosted in this program. Eco-transition and circularity. This is the angle that mainly Dr. Alain Dao brought to the center, where we work with social enterprises and startups that have an environmental mission. We support them in maximizing their impact. We put AUB's resources at their disposal. Citizenship and nature. So all our work on citizen guides, on community mobilization, on increasing awareness on environmental issues, and finally, regenerative planning. So regenerative planning is the program that hosts our work on policy level research, for example, we are oftentimes solicited to contribute to master plans, increase climate resilience within a particular area, and so on. So this would go into regenerative planning. We also looked again into the human resource structure to make sure that these programs, they have the right resources to support their development and growth. We figured out that with the small resources that we had, we couldn't afford to have a fully dedicated team to each program. Not only because of the resources, because there's also no need at this stage. All programs cannot, practically speaking, they will not function at the same pace. They will not constantly develop. There might be more opportunities in one than the other. So what we decided to do is to develop a multidisciplinary core team that would be run by the operations manager and the associate director. And this core team would function horizontally across all the programs and provide the different activities or support that the programs may need. And for example, there's no need to have one communications officer for each program. We only need one at the level of the center who can work across the programs. And this would also help us, again, in making sure that we are institutionalizing everything, we are working within the same standards and at the same level. We revisited, again, the profile and the people we needed to work in this core team. We have now grants writer, we have in-house researchers. 2 of them have just been recruited to add to the one that we already have. Communications manager, hopefully we'll have them soon. So we started looking into what kind of talent, what kind of skills were needed to very much support the programs horizontally. And we figured out that this would be the best way to reshape the operational structure of NCC, provide from the bottom up, provide support in monitoring and evaluation, grants writing, operations, finance management, in-house research for development, editing, And this would be the way that we work, is that at the end of the day, we have each program, they will have projects under them, they might have some interns, maybe later on some dedicated staff, but the way to launch these programs, we would have to be quite flexible and work in as much as possible in a cross-cutting way. We also decided to, very much organize the different affiliations that we had at the center and also grow them in a systematic way. So, it wasn't clear, for example, the responsibilities of the different volunteers, the different, board members and so on, what was expected of them. And also what's more important is that, because there was no systematic way of tracing down a lot of the people who contributed to the center, it was hard to recognize their effort, which was something we wanted to do. And so we revisited the affiliation framework and created two new types of affiliation: the senior fellow and we're going to call it fellow, not junior fellow. And we defined the conditions for internship so that later on, when you are asked for example, letters of recommendation or review, we can have a fair way to recognize the different contributions. We also initiated, we developed by December 2023, the calendar for 2024 was completely ready, and there were 12 days dedicated for internal training. And none of these trainings are related to environmental or climate topics. These are trainings to develop soft skills, to very much build the capacities of the team. As you'll see, some of them are about scientific research methods, some of them about knowledge dissemination, public speech, and so on. And we opened up these trainings to the different partners we work with at AUB. So, at these trainings, you'll find people from USFARI, from IFI, from other centers. We wanted to very much make these trainings accessible to everyone on campus. So these are the trainings. Also, in our effort to engage more faculty, besides the one-on-one meeting, besides, for example, this seminar or other engagements that we have, just by having, conversations hosted at NCC, we're able to get faculty to, contribute to a particular question, think together, and be part of the way, NCC revises its decision and direction. Sorry, this was supposed to come with the training. So, we also wanted to measure the efficiency of everything we do every step of the way. So, for example, measuring the feedback from the trainings was also important to make sure that, the selection of the trainings, the delivery method, the person we choose to deliver this training was also being revisited, and we're making sure that we're working in an efficient way. One of the big projects we launched last year with almost a zero budget was the Roundtable series, and there were a lot of suspicions as to how much is this connected to research, how much is this useful, should we spend some our own effort on it, and I mean, this is the you're gonna see. First of all, this was an opportunity to develop partnerships with these four entities: Islam Ferris Institute, USFARI Institute, the Heinrich Böll Foundation, and Arab Reform Initiative. And this was, I mean, even if it preparing a webinar or seminar is not. It doesn't take a lot of effort, but the idea of collaborating with a partner, the idea of exchanging thoughts, of making these personal connections does play a lot into who you end up partnering with on a grant, who you can end up designing a project with, what kind of expertise you bring into the center. So through this very simple initiatives, we were able to connect with all of these panelists. UN Habitat, we have, for example, about 3 or 4 proposals we are working with them, and it all started by hosting their director on the first roundtable. So all of these people, we found influential people, and we told them, we want to have a conversation with you that is open to the public, that we can learn from to direct the research we do at NCC, and see if there are more opportunities to collaborate together. And the thematics, they were also chosen in relation to what NCC does and the different priorities that we were perceiving at NCC, and they go from grassroots activism all the way to key issues like the COP28 or international cooperation. And last Thursday was the closing forum of the series. It was supposed to happen back in November. We had to postpone it, of course. But as you can see, I mean, we had very high-level discussions, and the World Bank actually chose us to present the first Lebanon country climate development report as part of the closing series of 2023 series. So, of course, after each series, we issued a brief, and this is also the lower row is an example of other non-academic publications we've been also investing in and that have had quite an impact. With this series, we've had more than 1,000 attendees. So these are 1,000 individuals who followed these conversations, who participated during the Q&A, and who are now individuals at NCC. They connect with us, they share with us ideas, and so on. In the closing series, you can see that also the audience was quite diverse. We're able to not only reach out to academics, but also to have a very wide array of organizations, of individuals who come in and participate in these discussions. You can also see that the audience was more or less spread around the world. So, it's a good measure to see how much our impact is being disseminated. So, these are also very, very nice opportunities to, connect, to, again, engage in conversations and get people to want to work with NCC and its team. One other thing we did is revisit our processes. So, we wanted to, again, measure how our time is being spent, where our effort is going, and by the end of the day, what did we do? Because obviously we all work in research, and I think each one of us has at some point asked themselves the question, what have I done today? Okay, so one way to measure this, because obviously research is a long-term process and its outputs sometimes can come after years of work, we wanted to very much classify also where our activities are going. And this was very important because we also hired a consultant to develop an internal monitoring and evaluation dashboard and framework. And and this framework, as you can see, will help us understand who we're working with, how we're working, the different impact that we have, whether it's from an organizational perspective, from a management perspective, or even from an impact perspective. So with each program will have its own impact measurement indicators. For water, it could be how many beneficiaries have now access to water because of this particular project. But we'll also have, a way to classify the data that we have at NCC and make sure that we are, we have solid archives, we have internal data management systems, and we're able to track what we have done to better know where we are going. So between 2022 and 2023, we started noticing the impact of this new way of operating and the strategic vision. We were able to increase the number of PIs and co-PIs from 7 to 20, so 65% increase. The active projects doubled. Number of publications went from 0 to 13 in 1 year. Number of submitted proposals didn't change a lot, but if you look at the envelope of proposals, you'll notice that it more than doubled. You'll also notice that these events that I'm talking about were very helpful. We doubled more or less the total amount of grants that we have been awarded. The core team size did not change, so now we know that we are working in a more efficient way and we're maximizing what we can do. And finally, of course, we were able to better manage the different interns and students who want to spend some time at NCC, and so we're able also to almost double the number. Some of the key lessons learned from this process so far is that, and let me just clarify that this is an ongoing process. So it's the implementation roadmap is a live document. We constantly go back to it, adjust some stuff, and so on. So As I mentioned before, we really underestimate within AUB how many individuals, departments are available and are willing to support. You know, the writing center, the library, the procurement department, the HR department, different faculties, they are willing to jump in at any opportunities, especially if we can also link it to education of their students. This is real live experience that, you know, we can offer to the students, and involving these different entities is very beneficial and interesting for us. Change cannot come without exhaustive alignment from AUB's leaderships to our interns. Each person has something to contribute. Each person did have an influence on the strategic vision of NCC. And, you know, by the end of the day, they are part of a constituency, and this vision needs to very much put forward what this constituency needs. Partnerships are key for growth. I mean, Yara Murad just left, but, you know, I just want to salute the Islam Faris Institute and their team. I mean, Yara, Marina, and Dr. Joe Bahoud for very much being available and supporting us. And I mean, they've been one of the key partners we've had in the year, not only for projects and events, but, you know, I could call them at any point, ask them a question, and very much learn from their experience. So this was something that was very important for us. Responsibility to our internal staff in developing their expertise. So again, our staff are not only here to only conduct research, publish the paper and leave. No, we have a responsibility to make their stay at NCC or wherever a meaningful stay in their career trajectory. We found that it was important to measure our impact in a systematic way, you know, to constantly report on our progress and make course corrections when needed. Planning and growth are meaningless without an established institutional memory. I always tell my team, I might get hit by a bus tomorrow. You're not allowed to stop working. I'll be back. I'm just going to be recovering. But, you know, everything is written on this document. You know what to do. Take it and implement it. It should not revolve around individuals. There should be a system. There should be an institution. And finally, knowledge dissemination, catering to audiences, and engaging various groups are an inherent part of research. If we don't communicate our research, then it won't have the impact. And, you know, this is constantly a debate. And then, you know, sometimes we have to constantly argue for this point, but especially in climate change will not come from academics. I'm sorry for those who thought climate change solutions will not come from academics. For those who thought it was, sorry to disappoint you. That's at least my personal opinion. It will come from, you know, every individual, every piece of the societal fabric. And if we don't engage with them, if we don't make our material accessible, if we don't make our material and the solutions relevant for them primarily before our own research interests, then, you know, there's really no point of having a center that is here to serve constituencies outside of AUB. So I think that's about it for me. You know, I had some extra slides. Do we have a few minutes or? Very quick. So just, you know, just a few extracts from the implementation roadmaps to see what we are talking about. So you can see that, you know, under each principle, there's the initiative, the date, the impact, the outputs, and its status. As you can see, I mean, some of the stuff, as I mentioned, you know, they could be digitization of processes, social activities for the team, you know, participation in workshop, office layout optimization, but they can also go to more strategic and high-level stuff, development of a business development plan, the HR restructuring, interim progress report. You know, some of this is under our educational pillar, so very much the type of thematics that we feel are important. And this is under the sustainable finance pillar, so working on an endowment, working on different sources, but also just to clarify that, you know, financial stability and sustainability has to do with being able to bring more funds to the center, but it also has to do with reducing unnecessary expenses. So it was important to work on, you know, both levels. You know, some of the projects that are ongoing, this one is with the ministry. And yeah, I'm not going to go into details, but thank you very much.
All right. So thank you so much for this comprehensive overview of the NCC Center and its vision and activities. We're just going to open the floor for questions right now. Okay. So so we have, I think, 10 minutes for questions. Let's start with. Okay.
So, welcome, Antoine. My name is Salim Adib. I'm a professor of public health here, and we're very happy to receive you in the temple of interdisciplinarity. Our business, public health, is sitting at the borders between medical, basic sciences, social sciences that impact on health, environmental and occupational health that impacts on. Our vision is, this business that we do here is to support and advocate for a better health for the population. And arguably, the better health for the population is the ultimate goal. Because if the trees are happy on the planet, and if the air is very pure on Earth, and there are no humans to profit from this, does it exist? Okay, the whole argument of Jean-Paul Sartre. So we've always been very interested in those various areas, including environmental health and the effect of conservation, social, physical, and heritage-wise. Now we have a new concept that is even pushing us through the international agencies to be more interested in the impact of environment and how it is linked to human and animal health, which is the One Health concept. And that One Health concept is prompting us in I think at least for me, in a totally different and new way in building indicators that share what's happening in nature with what's happening in human and animal health, and integrating more and more our surveillance systems to assess the needs and to evaluate the interventions. So it's a long way to tell you that this is the moment for public health to be more involved with NCC. I think in the past we were observing, but we were not participating, and I think that I speak for lots of our colleagues here to say that we want to be here, and we bring with us, I think, enough connections around the world that may be sources of findings, and we are interested in impacting. This is the long winding conversation.
Thank you.
The personal conversation is, you have 4 masters that
yes.
you showed us. When are you going to get a PhD?
I think I got my master's, so I don't get my PhD. But yeah, no, we are definitely interested in collaborating. I think this has already started. And, you know, throughout the 20 years, I was looking at the different PIs and co-PIs. FHS members have been a very important part of NCC. So definitely this is a structure meant to
Thank you, Antoine. يعطيكم العافية. This is huge. I'm trying to find another word. I hope you never get hit by a bus, but you might get hit by a motorcycle. فانتبه. So in your presentation, you mentioned a few terms that يعني rang the bell for me. يعني مثلا business, stakeholders, donors, private sector. And not just, and we can have a conversation, of course, and I would love to have a conversation. My name is Judy Makhloul. I'm the chairperson of the Department of Health Promotion.
No, I know of you, of course.
You know.
You're famous.
It's my job also to know.
Okay, all right, thank you. Okay, so my question here is, and I'm more than happy to have a discussion further and meet up with you to see how we can collaborate and support you. But, and you don't have to answer this, but it's something that we can discuss later on. What is the role of the industry? The industry, capital I. Mm-hmm. Because you mentioned, the private sector, but international industry. What is the role of the industry in your work? But also, if there is a role, other than, you know, maybe supporting a project here and there, what kind of due diligence process do you have to make sure that you will avoid any conflict of interest? You make sure that anything like that is detected and managed, because at the end of the day, يعني بالنهاية, all industries are really very interested in and want to, and already doing so, putting their, you know, foot in the door, especially at the level of academia. And we see this happening all over campus. But we are not yet there to just pause and think about what are the consequences. So I was wondering if you are thinking along these lines, if you have a process to, you know, just sift through potential partnerships or donors or contributions from industry under the guise of corporate social responsibility that might indirectly work fantastically for them because they're a private sector. ولكن نحن بالAUB, we're supposed to be academia, we're supposed to be working for the public good. So just يعني it's maybe a long story, but I just wanted to يعني ضوي على هذه الpoint. And thank you very much. And definitely we'll be connecting.
Thank you. Maybe we take the other questions and just to, Dr. Everything.
Thank you for the presentation. Maybe I'm coming to the beginning at the end, but I was wondering if in all of these strategic vision development, you considered whether the Nature Conservation Center is the right name for this institute/center, because
you know,
from my limited knowledge of the field, it seems to me that nature conservation is a somewhat dated term. And really what you guys are doing is so much more than that.
Let me start with Maya's question. It's more limited. You know, it's a big. It is a big issue. You know, there's an internal debate about it. Personally, yes, I am in favor for changing the name. Just NCC. Yeah, I do. I mean, you know, I agree with, and again, I don't come from an environmental background, so please take what I say, what I talk about with a grain of salt. And you know, this is also a very discipline-oriented conversation. Those who come from ecosystems management or from landscape design and so on, they do place, you know, the connection with nature and conserving nature at you know, at the heart of any way forward. People like me who come from a more, I would say, policy or economics background, I do believe that, you know, we need to align around what works best for all. We need to make wins. We need to work on international priorities like climate issues through policy. So, you know, it's a big conversation. Now, taking it back to the name, the constraints that we have is some of the questions that we have, I would say, is on one hand, you know, NCC has its own trademark or brand recognition, to put it in business terms. Do we let go of that, or how do we manage the transition? Second question, what is the new name? This is, yeah, I mean, do we focus on sustainability, on climate, on environment? You know, we have to, and you know, if it's at the end of the day, it's just a name. So if the buzzword will increase your chances of, you know, getting more funding or so on, it's. I'm not saying we should do it. I'm saying it should be part of the conversation. And third,
the worst part of changing names is to make sure that you do not go over turf of somebody that is already doing something.
Obviously, turfs.
Some of the things that you mentioned, the workshops.
Three.
The project of these workshops that you're planning for every month, many of them are at the core of the work of lots of other institutions.
I know. I mean, we had someone at AUB who insisted on being in every panel that mentioned the term climate change. So, you know, I haven't responded yet. We should have it, thus. Okay. So, we are actively looking for an endowment. So should we hold off the name change until we if someone wants to name the center? I don't have an answer to each of these questions. I know that this is a conversation with these questions. So, it is an important conversation to have. It has to align with what we are trying to achieve. It has to align with where do we want NCC, whatever we end up naming it. Where do we want it? What is best for our impact? And again, to how important or how connected the name is to the issue of impact. So yeah, no, thank you for the question. I've also, I actually wrote a letter to Alain saying that we need to have a conversation about the name, just to put it on the record, that it's my job to bring up this issue, but it is a big issue. As to Dr. Makhul's question in terms of the industry, it is also, it is an important question. We want to avoid industries trying to take advantage of academic research centers. We want to avoid them, want to avoid greenwashing. We want to avoid, those who want us to plant 2 million trees to offset their carbon footprint, but they want their trees to, they want to carve the name of the company on each, I don't know. So, we are well aware of these risks. They are part of the job. They are part of the engagement. We don't engage with partners unconditionally. We insist that at the end of the day, what we bring to the table has to be backed up by evidence. It has to be using the scientific approach. It has to be inclusive. So we go back a bit to, the principles that guide our work. Now, the question, for example, very much arises around consulting. And I think this is also an issue at the university level. Should research centers engage in consulting projects or not? If we find that the terms of references are fair and they give us enough room to contribute to a consulting project through the academic perspectives, then we strongly consider it. And the example I'm going to give, for example, we submitted, the World Bank issued a request for proposals for Beirut's new resilient and green recovery strategy. Okay, so you could argue that this could be a fully academic paper, and this could also have the risk of being taken by a boutique consultancy who would, just rephrase the terms of references, do a couple of slides, and come up with something that is very, I would say, irrelevant and just what the World Bank wants to hear. We ended up part of a consortium with an engineering firm, with a French urban studies center, and us. And we actually led on the writing of the strategy and the methodology for the proposal. And everyone was aligned with us. So, in this case, we find that it is interesting because at the end of the day, this is a document that will have impact, whether we like it or not. The new strategy for Beirut, if they're working on a strategy for resilience and green recovery, then we do believe that an evidence and an academic based approach to reach these conclusions is actually very beneficial and is needed in a country like Lebanon. So, also, again, we have to distinguish between faculties and research centers. Research centers, they have, in a way, the mandate to engage more and more with this type of work. So, in this case, we were happy to be part of the consortium. But again, it's very much, we don't take any consultancy, we don't work with any partner, we don't work with any industry player unless, we can, place the values of NCC at the forefront and make sure we're not overturning them.
And consultancies are good for sustainable funding.
Absolutely.
At the end of the day, if the government of Lebanon wants you to present a presentation as a research center at the AUB, you can't say no.
Exactly. And this is why we established the regenerative planning program, because we are being solicited by municipalities, by parliament members. Parliament members, if they want to do an environmental recovery strategy for their constituency, they are doing it for the political votes. But fine, let them do it for the political vote. If we can actually advance the right strategy that is based on what we believe in and how we believe it should be done, then this is an opportunity for us. And at the end of the day, it's the constituency and the community that is benefiting. Yes.
Question just whether forest and forest management is part of under which portfolio is.
So, because NCC is a multidisciplinary research center, there's always, we don't only work on forest management, it's usually connected to something else. So, but depending on the project itself, how it's framed, we end up putting it under one or the other programs. So, so far, forestry, they either go under citizenship and nature, or they go under regenerative planning, depending on, the approach. If it's a master plan, it's usually under regenerative planning. If it's more a community engagement for reforestation project, it goes under citizenship. I mean, these, we're not attached to the idea of having, each project exclusively in one program. We know that there's a lot of cross-cutting themes, but we do know that we want to build, areas of excellence in these thematics. So this was for us the primary goal. And yeah, we might, it's because it's an ongoing conversation. Should projects only go under one program, or can they go under two programs at once? But yeah, I would say from my experience that, forestry is either going under regenerative planning or citizenship and nature.
Thank you, Antoine. I think NCC is under very good management. So thank you for this enthusiasm and for this persistence. I was very interested in learning when you showed us this slide with the map on your strategy for networking. And how did you achieve this wide network? It's on, yeah, this one. No, this one.
Okay.
So how do you do your outreach? What is your strategy? You're spread all over the world. You still need a little bit in Southeast Asia. Which part is it? Maybe you need Australia and New Zealand.
Asia, except the Gulf. Yeah.
So can you tell us what is your approach and how do you do it? And how do you spread your tentacle? This octopus has its legs everywhere.
So it's a good question. We've been without a communications officer since August, and this is an AUB issue. So more or less, we've had to take on the issue of communication and outreach by ourselves internally. And by advertising using AUB's networks, using our own personal networks and so on. I mean, each of us, and of course AUB has this international audience. Some of them might already know about NCC, others less, but at the end of the day, it's about tapping into these different networks, because NCC, of course, has its own community, but it's not enough to sustain our engagement. So this is why I mentioned the lessons learned, that partners are essential. And it's by sharing these networks, these resources, this know-how that you can end up internalizing NCC.
Right. So thank you so much, Antoine, again, for sharing all this lessons learned and strategy from the NCC, which is going to pave the way for future collaboration, hopefully. Thank you so much.